I just read chapter 6 of Hofstader's book, I'm a Strange Loop, and I really appreciate his frankness, and he's very discreet about what he's really trying to say. He's not trying to hide the fact that he is a he wants a reductionistic explanation. Um, he says that in reference to this inner experience of I-ness, chapter 6 is called Of Selves and Symbols. And he says his goal in this book is basically to explain not only that the sense of I, of being an ego, is an illusion, but that any sense of inwardness, of consciousness, of being aware from the inside out is an illusion. He wants to reduce that interiority to an exteriority. So he wants to reduce the I perspective to an it perspective. Um, I'll read here. To some people, perhaps to most, perhaps even to us all, the ineffable sense of being an I, or a first person, the intuitive sense of being there, or simply existing, the powerful sense of having experience, and of having raw sensations, what some philosophers refer to as qualia, seem to be the realest things in their lives, and an insistent inner voice bridles furiously at any proposal that all this might be an illusion, or merely the outcome of some kind of physical process taking place among third person, i.e., inanimate objects. My goal here is to combat this strident inner voice. So he says it right there. He wants to reduce the first person perspective to the third person. And I suppose I must be one of those people who bridle furiously against any proposal that this all might be an illusion. Um, because I wholeheartedly agree with Hofstadter that the I, this discrete sense of being an individual that has a constant, permanent identity, that is an illusion, and I agree completely. But that does not mean that my inward awareness of an exterior or my inward awareness of the world is an illusion that should be reduced only to the exterior. That leaves us with nothing but a collection of surfaces, and there's no inward mystery. There's no um, consciousness of any of the exterior. Um, and Hofstadter is probably the best example of one of the emergence people. So he's caught in between the enactivism and the representationalism, but he is still fundamentally representationalist. He still thinks of a brain as an input-output processor that recognizes objects in the environment, represents them using symbols in the mind, in the brain. And he means by symbols a structure, a neural structure, whether it's a global structure of neurons connected or not. It's still a symbolic mechanism. So it's still representation. It's that there is this solid foundational exterior world full of objects that the brain mirrors. So he's still in that fundamental Enlightenment paradigm, the kind of thing that most postmodern philosophers just want to trash because they're totally fed up with it. Richard Rorty comes to mind. Obviously, any postmodernist philosopher is gonna be critical of this idea. He perceives the relationship between symbols or structures in the brain to concepts as the same between genes and physical traits. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of what he's saying. And this all seems to me like an over-intellectualization of what the mind is and how we are aware of ourselves and of the world. We aren't aware of the world in this way, and in this representational way. I don't have a representation for these discrete objects. I am in a gestalt. I have a gestalt experience, and every situation is different. Every situation, obviously, I'm calling up memories that I have, and those memories allow me to act appropriately. But there aren't these discrete symbols or representations. I can't see that as a tenable hypothesis. It seems totally, it's way too abstract for an organic being such as myself, or such as the dog you may have seen in the background. It's my golden retriever back there, but organisms aren't this way. They're sloppy and intuitive, and the way we get around the world is based more on context than on text, than on symbols. It's based more on the overall picture, fitting into an environment. So Hofstader wants to remain tied to this idea of symbols, and this is still the Cartesian framework, because if you're gonna say that there are structures in here that represent the world, that doesn't explain how I am aware of those structures. There still must be an interpreter of those symbols, and now we're back to there having to be an ego, or an interpretive mind separate from the body's symbolic structures, to read the structures, to attribute meaning to them. So Hofstadter is still tied to that old paradigm that simply is, it's just too dualistic to be naturalized. I think if we Freud's idea of the structure of the mind, of there being an unconscious, an ego, and a superego, or id, ego, and superego. Hofstadter seems still tied to that idea, because Freud wanted to naturalize the mind and reduce it all to biological principles, to the drive for pleasure and sex. So if we want to switch Freud's terms around, we change the id to the unconscious. The ego becomes the conscious mind, and the superego becomes the self-conscious mind. And Hofstadter wants to say that human beings have this self-consciousness, or the superego level, which reflects back on the ego, or the conscious level, which just acts in the world and doesn't reflect on its action. So it's the same Enlightenment paradigm of representationalism, with this added feature of emergence. It just it's a fancy word to sort of explain, oh, there's no mystery in the mind, it's just complicated symbols and stuff. So yeah, it's a great book, though. I'm enjoying being able to draw the contrast between enactivism and emergence, and Hofstadter is very clear about what he is trying to say, and he's not trying to beat around the bush, so I appreciate that. So yeah, thanks for listening.